it is really a multi-stakeholder workshop, and we are from many countries, many stakeholder groups, and all the topics will be discussed today. Thank you very much.
Good morning. So I hope you can, I hope that you hear me well. I wanted to do now a little bit of presentation. I stand on the national plans related to the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which, as you know, is this additional EU budget that we are putting together with EU member states to address the crisis of the COVID and ensure a quicker recovery of the economies, and also present to you some green considerations related to this facility, which, you know, and I think that this is an important point, is still under discussion with the Council and the European Parliament. So on this first slide, I mean, you have a little bit of a summary on where do we stand. I think it is important to mention that the access to the funds of the facility are based on national. They are the responsibility of the member state. The Commission is going to assess the plans, but the Commission is certainly not the one drafting the plan. So ourselves, we will be assessing the investments and the reforms that the member state intends to do with the funds of this facility. Now, these reforms and investments that member states intend to do, they are framed by the strategic orientations set out in the context of the Annual Sustainable Growth Strategy, which is a document that the Commission adopted in September. The reforms and investments, they need to comply with the country-specific recommendations that were issued in the years 2019, and that provides a framework for the member states to prepare these investments and these reforms. Now, I think it is also important in September, we provided with detailed guidance and a standard template to report on these investments and on these reforms. Now, drafts of the recovery plans that member states are putting together can be already sent to us. They started being sent to us in different shapes as of the 15th of October of 2020. And we are now engaging in a technical discussion with member states regarding of this, that what is being considered as part of reforms and investment, technical aspects and the mechanics of the facility are well integrated from the beginning. So we provide a positive opinion on the plans. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay.
Yes.
So in assessing, in assessing the national plans, the Commission will consider whether the plans contribute effectively to the challenge identified in the countries, in the relevant specific recommendations of the European semester. Also, you know that contain measures that effectively contribute to the green conditions, and that they contribute to strengthening the growth potential, the job creation, and the economic and social resilience. I'm going to look at. I mean, today I'm going to explain to you how we are going to look into the plans of the member states, and after we have provided, let's say, a positive assessment, it will be ultimately for the council.
Excuse me, Mika, your voice is breaking quite.
To approve the plans. No.
Your voice is breaking quite many times. I don't know if you can somehow improve it.
I'm going to shut down. What I'm going to do is to shut video. I think that this can help. Can you hear better now?
Yes, a bit better, yes.
Hello?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. So I will try in any case to speak slowly and without the video. I think it would make things better. So I was saying that the Commission will assess the plans. We are not responsible of the drafting, but of the assessment. And afterwards, the plans, they are have to be approved by the European, by the Council of the European Union. And there, you know, my first comment is that, you know, depending on this positive assessment, there would be already a first disbursement of 10% of the funds of the plan. The rest of the disbursement, they will happen in tranches linked to the achievement of milestones and targets. We can move to the next slide. Okay, one of the important issues that we need to look into in order to approve, you know, the plans of the member states, to give a positive assessment of the plans of the member states, is to assess the do no significant harm principle. So this means, you know, that we need to make sure that, you know, the components included in the plan, and this applies to the whole plan, not only to areas like energy, biodiversity, or others. I mean, it's to the whole plan. We need to assess the do no significant harm principle. I mean, there is explicit reference to this in the Recovery and Resilience Facility regulation and the accompanying documents. Basically, there is in the Council General Approach a link to Article 17 of the Taxonomy Regulation and Article 16 on the assessment. And, you know, this is one of the points where the Council and the Parliament, they agree. Now, the issue there is that, you know, the delegated acts of the taxonomy, they are not yet available. So we are developing an operationalization of this principle close to the proposal of the Commission related to the delegated acts. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so as I was saying, I mean, the scope of the do no significant harm principle applies to each measure in the recovery and resilience plan. So to each investment and each reform. It is not limited to green issues. It's not limited to climate change measures. And this is effectively one of the most important things that we will be looking at related to the plans. I mean, in order for us to be able to provide a positive assessment. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, in parallel, we are doing another exercise. We have, you know, required from the regulation to apply this do no significant harm principle. Now, in parallel, and this is a separate thing, we need to have a green tagging of the measures in the plan. So there is, you know, in the proposal of the Commission on the MFF and also on the Next Generation EU, you know, a requirement for a 30% climate mainstreaming target, meaning that 30% of, you know, what is spent from the EU budget and from Next Generation EU in the next, you know, in the next years is at least, you know, a 30%, you know, climate. And we have even a higher target for the recovery and resilience facility, meaning that for each plan of presented by the member states, we need to reach this 37% climate mainstreaming target. What this means is that we are going to apply the methodology of the Common Provision Regulation, the same one that has been negotiated in the context of the Common Provision Regulation for the next programming period, for the period 2021-2027, and we have to go through each measure, you know, of the plan. I mean, to see if it complies with this climate tagging. I mean, meaning that, you know, the measure is 100%, you know, compliant with the climate, 40% or 0%, and at the end of the day, we will, you know, addition all of these percentages to the cost included in the recovery and resilience plan. And, you know, for us, in order to be able, you know, to approve the plan, we need to have this climate mainstreaming. I think I am done with the presentation. I wanted to have it quite short so that we can have questions later on, from to me, and that I can answer to you, and we can engage into a discussion. So many thanks, and happy.
Thank you, Alexa. I will share my screen right now. Can you see it well?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So thank you, Miguel, for this presentation, and Alexa for the introduction. I want to speak today about the public participation in the planning of the RRPs, so the recovery and resilience plans, and the programming of cohesion policy in general. I mean, this is something that is extremely important for civil society organizations, but public participation is also recognized across the board, and especially by EU institutions, as something very important. I mean, the latest communication of the Green Deal says that the involvement and commitment of the public and of all stakeholders is crucial to the success of the European Green Deal. And this is something we would agree on definitely, especially because what we see is that it's difficult, even for an institution such as the European Commission, to also check the coherence and the relevance on the ground of every plan and every strategic document. And that's why cooperation with civil society and stakeholders is key. So there are various tools and legal requirements for the involvement of the public in all these plans. And this is really what is, I think, the heart of the matter today, when we talk about how to plan and how to ensure that we deliver the Green Deal. There is a significant amount that is related to the involvement of the public. I would just start to remind the finding of the study that Bankwatch released earlier this week about the recovery and resilience facility and the involvement of the public in those plans. And even though things are moving very fast and evolving, we can say that at the moment, the involvement of the public is not as good as it should be as far as the RRPs are concerned. And I mean, just a few words for some countries of interest. For Czechia, I think that was famous that Czechia was the first country to submit its draft recovery and resilience plan in October. There were problems with approval even at government level, and no real public consultation. So this is also something that we try to avoid, and that is symptomatic, the fact that plans could be submitted without even though they are draft plans, without even consultation at national level. This is also something that we find in Poland, where there were no public consultations or any other kind of dialogues on the priorities that are happening. And the fact that strategic environmental assessments might not be needed according to the government. This is also echoing what we see on the programming of the EU funds, especially for Poland, but I will have a few words about that later. Also a few words about Slovakia, that has been involved in citizens from August. This is something that we noticed, and we also had the chance to have our members involved in these discussions. So there are also positive examples, even though this is only the start of the process, and we should not say that everything is already fine for Slovakia. And also a recent developments that on 2nd of December, so this Wednesday, the draft the recovery and resilience plans for Hungary was published for public consultation on the website of the government. So indeed, things are evolving, and this is really important to involve the civil society and partners as early as possible. In terms of example, I would also talk about Romania, which is also a good example, because the draft recovery and resilience plan was officially published at the end of November. Public consultation was open online, but we don't really know the deadline. And the thing is that we don't really have much more information about about strategic environmental assessments, or about how the comments and the input from civil society will be taken into consideration into the plans. And I mean, this is also, I'm not speaking about public participation for the sake of it, because this is also something that we see, and this is why I'm insisting on coherence, is that not only these countries are not always consulting as well as they should, but also their plans, when they are not consulted, are especially not aligned with the European Green Deal. And I mean, for Romania, we know that there is an expansion of the gas network and a very low allocation for, I would say, climate positive investments such as renewable energy efficiency or research and innovation. This is really also yes, the link between the process itself and the content. We know, and we analyzed recently that in the past years, that the national energy and climate plans in Central and Eastern Europe were not up to the task and were not up to achieving the 2030 objectives, especially now that the objectives, especially for the greenhouse gas reduction, has been increased, especially because also they contain a lot of investments in waste incineration, gas pipelines, and unsustainable biomass. So we know that NECPs are really not up to the task, and it's really up to the recovery and resilience funds and cohesion policy investments, which also have a lot of potential in terms of public funding to support this ambition. This is a table with a summary of our finding in the study. I will not spend too much time on this table, just to let you know that the figure on the left are the amount to be received by these countries in terms of grants, because we do not have still clarity on the loans that they might request for the recovery and resilience facility. And instead of spending too much time on the table, I would just like to tell you about the programming itself of cohesion policy, which is another process, but it's going in parallel, and it's also very important in terms of knowing which investments will be supported by the cohesion policy, and also how civil society can be involved. And I mean, very quickly on programming, we know that there are two important documents, the partnership agreements that outline basically the country strategy, and then the operational program covering entire member states or regions, and also containing regional and sectoral objectives and allocations. So for the programming, we again have tools and again have solutions to involve and to create public participation. I mean, the partnership principle was created in 1988, sorry. It also really supports multi-level governance, involvement of regional, local authorities, civil society organization. And it was completed by the European Code of Conduct on Partnership in 2014, which is also setting up a mechanism for managing the EU funds, especially again, involving civil society at all stages of the process, from the planning to the evaluation, and especially also being transparent in the selection of partners, supporting capacity building, and having a transparent flow of information. I mean, these are the proven benefits of a partnership. I will not spend too much time on this. I would just try to also make the case also for the strategic environmental assessment, which stems from the ACA directive. And it is also asking for a mandatory assessment for programs prepared for a range of sectors, including energy, industry, transport, waste, water management. I mean, all issues and sectors that are covered or are touched by the recovery and resilience facility. There is, again, the strategic environmental assessment, again, foresees that public must be informed and consulted at every stage, but also in an early stage, really to identify the adverse effects before it's too late and before the plans are already agreed, which would mean that there is no possibility or no space to change anything. Of course, our expertise or experience shows that it's not because you have a strategic environmental assessment that the plans are drastically improved, or sometimes the SEAs are conducted too late to have an effect, but at least having one is a guarantee of consultation to a certain extent. I'm saying that because on programming, we really see that Central and Eastern Europe member states are still reluctant to open consultations. Every country has the programming already ongoing, but we know that, for example, in Bulgaria and Poland, we have problematic issues with the involvement of stakeholders. And also the fact that this might even appear as a strategy by these governments that are playing the clock and basically delaying consultation until it's too late, because programming should have been closed by the end of this year, as the program have to start on the beginning of next year. Obviously, we were expecting some delays, and delays are normal, but at the same time, this can also be something that is used by government to exploit and avoid consulting their public. I'm just arriving to my conclusion and repeating that we need coherence between all these plans that are currently being drafted and that will prove to be the main investments, public investments of the EU in the next decade. And I mean, we need coherence between all these instruments, and involvement of the partners is absolutely crucial to improve this coherence and the strategic relevance of the plans, which should not be only a catalog of projects that were in the drawers or of the shelf of the governments, but rather should have a common strategy. And I would just finish with open questions, because this is really what we want to know, I think, in terms of how to influence the policy and the implementation of these plans, is how can the European Commission help civil society to get involved? Will strategic environmental assessment, will they be required? And will we see the plans before they are agreed upon and completely closed before that, so that we are able to influence, or at least to know and to analyze their content? And I think these three questions, if we were able to respond positively to the three questions, it would go a long way for public participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexa. You see my slides. I hope. Good. Markus Trilling, my name. I'm with Climate Action Network Europe, Can Europe. And actually, I would like to take one step back. Thanks again, Miguel, for showing us in a way the formal setup of the recovery plan development assessment. And thanks, Rafael, for highlighting the opportunities, but as well the current threats that the whole process might not end up being transparent, being carried by ownership. So what I would like to do now, look more from the beginning to put all the EU funding we are seeing into the broader perspective in the climate and environmental debate we are facing at the moment, namely that we have to massively ramp up climate action in terms of targets, in terms of legislation, and of course, in mobilizing and steering all, in our case, available EU funding to achieve our objectives. In the next good 10 minutes, I will run you through the basic information of the Recovery Fund, the Cohesion Policy funding, and the Just Transition funding. I will show you some figures about what your country will receive. Later on, you will get a copy of the legislations, of the presentation, so don't worry by all the information we are getting. And I will actually end as well with again, another couple of questions for Miguel, how the Commission will indeed address many of those openings we are seeing here. Okay, now the task is clear. You see here what we have to do. This is the picture from the European Commission. It shows you the way how to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Can Europe says we must achieve near zero net emissions, meaning not emitting more than planet can absorb by 2040. Good. So you see here, this is the task for all sectors of the economy. We have to rebuild our built environment. This is transport, this is housing, this is the way we eat, this is the way our industry produces, and so on. And the EU budget is the 10 years investment plan. And what is very clearly now that already during the implementation of the EU's money, the rate of greenhouse gas emissions, the transformation has to speed up. Make no mistake, every investment decision taken today has to lead to climate neutrality. We're thinking about long-term investments. If you're now investing in long-term infrastructure, for example, in gas, this will burn way into the next decades. So from this point of view, again, the MFF is crucial for many sectors and for many regions. These are the greenhouse gas emissions per sector. These are five years old. This might have changed, but the message is clear. This is the task for society, for the European economy. This has to go down to zero. And the EU budget is perfectly shaped to deliver on the transformation of all those sectors. Of course, cohesion policy invests into waste. Is it waste incineration or is it reduction and reduce of waste? Transport, is it carbon incentive transport? Is it the electrification and sustainable modes of transport? Building sector, we know about. This has a huge investment need. Are we going to really renovate buildings, put renewable solutions placement in it, or will we again miss this opportunity? So this is for cohesion policy. Of course, this is for the Just Transition Fund. And this is the case for all other EU budget funds. Common agricultural policy. Of course, we need a different cap to get the shift in farming. Connecting Europe facility. Do we need more pipelines? Do we need to have more import capacity from Russia, from Azerbaijan, from Arabia? Or do you really connect the renewable potentials of Europe and so on? Horizon Europe, research innovation. If we want to keep leadership on innovative solutions, we have to massively invest into those breakthrough technologies. So no doubt the budget can deliver. And of course, sorry, I forgot, there's a recovery fund. On top of all, Miguel said something about digital and green transition. We later will see this is a few options, what is possible. Again, and this is a lot of money. And I will now talk you through the different funds a little bit closer. So again, don't worry, you will get the slides. Here you see what each country is supposed to get as grants from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And here as well, the list of what the Commission would like to see in member states' plans that they finance here. Green technologies, renovation of buildings, for example, or the electrification of transport. So very clear green headlines. And as Miguel mentioned, there is even the obligation to spend 37% for climate and environmental transition. Cohesion policy funding. Many of you, I know, are very familiar with this for decades, with all the goods and definitely as well the threats. You know, the deeper the red, the more money you get. We are very close to finalizing the legislation. There are some good news as well. Here we have 30% of the regional development fund has to be put into renewables, energy efficiency, circular economy, and so on. Again, this is just the quantitative elements. So again, here a big potential in regional development funding. And then last but not least, this is here the Just Transition Fund, again, with a very, very clear purpose to help those regions to move to climate neutrality. This is about economic diversification, so carbon intensive coal mining, peat regions, and so on, really to get the tools to move away their economy from to a different sustainable solution. Now, you have 10 seconds to identify your country. This is the list of all the EU funds which are relevant. This is structural funds, this is agricultural policy, recovery and resilience facility, just translation fund, modernization fund, and ETS. So how much money is this? And this is, again, to give you now an idea of the weight. So the figures I showed you are for 7 years, respectively 4 years. If all the money would be spent in 1 year, right, you would see this is the share of the GDP of a country. And this is massive. Look at Bulgaria, Croatia, Latvia, Poland, just to give you an idea. Normally our countries having like between 30, 40 to French 50% of the GDP is government money. So you could say we can run countries entirely from the EU money. What about infrastructure? So normally you say roughly that 3% of the GDP is public infrastructure investments. So everybody who complains there is not enough money for the transition, look at this massive resources at hand. Just another example here, again, a little bit later. This is the share of EU funds in public infrastructure investments. This might have shifted, but I think the message is the same. Infrastructure, the transition financing can be financed by EU funds if member states choose to. This is the caveat. So again, a run through the areas. So we have cohesion policy here for SMEs, for the shift to the green low carbon Europe. We have money for transport and ICT and energy connectivity. We have the social element, the social fund, and the social pillar of rights, pillar of social rights, sorry. And then, of course, very important as well, I come to this, the idea that all those objectives involve citizens. So this is the question of transparency, this is the question of involvement, but as well of capacity building and of mobilization. So quickly in detail, we will have member states will have to spend 30% of their ERDF into clean energy, into storage, into adaptation, to a certain as well, to sustainable mobility. So far, so good. The bottom-up approaches, local action groups, community local development. Here again, this is something with a potential to build bottom-up approaches to include all players, stakeholders in the ground to develop their own just sustainable transition plans. And the good news is, since yesterday, 95% co-financing for many of the regions. Again, now something more, let's say, close to what Miguel explained, right? What is here the strategic framework? What are the horizontal elements which could steer the planning and the spending of those funds? So of course, you know, we have the Green Deal, and very clearly the 2050 climate neutrality target will happen, and hopefully next week leaders will agree on a new 2030 target. We would think everything less than 65% is not appropriate for the European Union. Then you might heard about, many of you studied as well, national energy climate plans, where EU funds are featured in the implementation of the measures. Then, as well, Miguel mentioned the European semester as the guiding tool for looking at what countries want to achieve. Then we have here as well very important elements close to the planning and implementation. This is the climate proofing of cohesion policy investments. Miguel mentioned the do no significant harm principle. And last but not least as well, it looks like we have the opportunity to rethink cohesion policy funding at its midterm review. Good. So I said there is a lot of money. There is everything what we need is eligible. So where's the problem? The problem is that member states don't do it. We have currently a very small approach amount of money going to clean energy. We know in the past, and even so in the future, there is the idea that fossil fuels can be financed. Many countries think, and the Commission is supporting this myth that gas is a bridging fuel. I mentioned the stranded assets term. So, and as well what we hear from our colleagues on the RRPs, this really smells like business as usual. We know member states tend to finance what they had financed. Well, they are allowed to finance what the expenditures which are coming from since February this year in their RRPs. They tend to put all the nice stuff into the Brussels plan to please Brussels, but they're not really doing the transformational change they're doing in the rest of it. So what can we do about it? I mean, I was saying, well, okay, I'm hurrying, I have to speed up a little bit. What is the Commission indeed aiming at? So I give you here an example of one of the country-specific recommendation Miguel mentioned. So here you see that for Spain, the Commission says, please, Spain, put money into the renovation of your building stock, help the energy poor, deploy the smart grids and smart electricity, support energy communities, prosumers, get renewables into heating and cooling. So far, so good. I think this is very, very plausible, and this is definitely priorities we would like, we would share in a sense. However, we know that European Green Deal is something very complex and is very long term. We know that many of the NECPs are already outdated. They are not ambitious enough. They are fragmented. They don't lead to the level of ambitions we want to see in 2030. So far, when you follow the European semester in the last years, you know that first of all, it's not binding. We know the Commission aims to include SDGs, but in the end, there will be 2, 3 in the past country-specific recommendations, and the focus on macroeconomic elements prevailed. However, of course, we are really at the edge of a new epoch. We have the climate law. We will have a new 2030 target. We will have new energy and climate targets next year. So no doubt that EU funds have to play a role in the implementation. So I'm coming close to an end now. What one we want to see, and what do we want to see from the Commission as well? Raphael mentioned it. The transition is not something straightforward, which we just click on by tomorrow. And the RRF really gives the opportunity to combine reforms with the investments needed. This is important, that we get the legislation right and put the investments behind it. The Commission has to really look that this is as well coordinated between the funds, right? The RRF has to do this, and the cohesion policy that, and this has to fit. And this is not all in one, but we have to stage the process. We need a time where we prepare the authorities with the capacity, the beneficiaries, where we create the market, where we got the standards and the legislation, right, the framework. And this needs to happen. This is not happening at the moment. Then we need, again, a planning. And this has to be place-based, this has to be strategic, but it as well, of course, is not one size fits all. We have to look what is the situation in the ground. And then, of course, the implementation happens. And this has to be all thought through in a thing. Miguel, do no significant harm. In the template, this is a tick boxing exercise. So far, we have seen this. This is not enough. This will not work. You really have to force member states to think it through, to bring the criteria into the game. And then again, European semester. We're having the greening the European semester for a decade. SDGs is now included, but this is all still not fully fledged governance of the entirety of the economy. Okay, so. I think what I want to say here, we have significant financial resources coming from the EU budget. For some regions and for some members, they are probably the only on the most important one. The transformational impact is not guaranteed yet. We know this, and it is particular in the role of the European Commission when assessing the plans, when negotiating the plans. This is the RRF, but as well cohesion policy and just transition funds, to make sure that the transition is clearly locked in and will be rolled out with the help of EU funds. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to, to provide the opportunity for our speakers to reflect on each other. So the floor is yours. So, for example, Rafael, directed questions to Miguel at the end of his presentation, that how can the European Commission help CSOs to get involved in the programming of the cohesion funds and of the RRPs, and will the European Commission require an SEA for recovery and resilience plans?
Okay, may I ask you, because I'm not sure I understand, the SEA, what it means?
A strategic environmental assessment.
Okay, no, very, very good. So, I mean, what I'm going to speak now is about the recovery and resilience facility, because, I mean, this is the facility we are in charge ourselves. I understand that, there's a big involvement in the, in the definition of the programming of the cohesion funds. And there's a big tradition on that. Ourselves, what we have in the legal proposal of the RRF is a requirement, to have good consultations in the member states in the preparation of the plans. Now, the way that this, is taken forward, I mean, this is something that is, in the hands of the different member states. Ourselves, we have, this requirement, and again, we will, we will assess it. Now, regarding the recovery and resilience plans, I mean, the requirements we have are the ones that appear in the regulation. So basically, a justification for each measure in the plan, beyond, and I mean all the measures, beyond energy, climate, and so on this do no significant harm principle. I mean, this is very clearly one of the, big issues that we need to look at in the context of the plan, and then, the green tagging. So, I mean, the reaching this 37%. So, I mean, these are the issues that, ourselves we have to work on, that we need to assess in order for the plans to be able to be, to have a positive assessment from the Commission.
I can jump in with a question to Miguel, because Miguel, you said you're working on the operationalization of the do no significant harm principle in the absence of the delegated act. We know the delegated act is under public consultation, but I'm sure you already know there will be different responses on many of the elements. Can you already maybe give us an idea how deep the guidelines going to be? Will we see the technical criteria mirrored in the guidelines currently for mitigation adaptation? How will you how deep will you go in operationalizing the do no significant harm principle of the other environmental objective, which have not been that much elaborated yet publicly?
Okay, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I cannot answer, on where this, operationalization would appear, if it's in the form of guidelines or whatever. I mean, because this is, yet under discussion. I mean, ourselves, what we're working is on the substance, and in my opinion, I mean, we are going to go quite deep, because we need to assess every measure, in terms of policy reform or whatever that the member states are doing on the basis of this principle. So, in that sense, we would go pretty deep. I mean, yeah.
Thank you, Alexa. You stopped me. You stopped me because again there is one question from one of our colleagues here, and we see this in different countries. What will the Commission do when they're receiving an RRF where climate and the green transition is well explained, but then again, when you look into the overall context of the country's recovery and their funding, where, at least from our perspective, you would see contradictory elements, where again you would think what the one hand gives is taken away with the other hand. And how far can we think the Commission is an ally in getting the entire recovery of a country on track to catalyze the just transition?
I mean, I think, the assumption that you're making that we are receiving complete recovery and resilience plans is not the case yet. I mean, we are receiving parts of plans, components, specific investments, and so on. So, I mean, we don't have yet the elements, to answer to this question, about, having some things on one hand and then other things on the other. I mean, this is not yet available. I mean, ourselves, what we will have to do is apply, the regulation. So there, it's clear that we have to go through each and every component on the do no significant harm principle. So, that is to ensure that the plan as it is leads to a credible reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, this is very clear. And then that the plan has to comply, with this at least 37% spending, on climate issues. So I think, that the requirements there are pretty clear, and the areas of tension are very clear as well. So I think that applying the principle, it is clear that the plans will have to contain these very, very, very let's say specific measures leading to a credible and robust trajectory. I mean, otherwise it would be not possible for us to provide a positive assessment.
Can I have a last question? And as well, picking up what I'm interested in, and this is what was made in the chat. Again, we know as well here in CE countries, there are many people convinced that the transition away from coal can only happen via the employment of fossil gas. The science says that methane in its life cycle is hardly more climate friendly than coal, for example. At the same time, we hear the Commission saying this burning methane, for example, in the housing sector is accepted as a bridge solution to at some point switch to finally sustainable solutions. And this is as well the argument from many potential beneficiaries who want to use EU funds for gas in heating and cooling, in electricity generation. What tools does the Commission have in hand to really prove that those so-called bridge investment is really a bridge and will not end up as an asset which keeps emitting greenhouse gases way beyond our climate neutrality goals?
Well, I think clearly, you point to what we have to look at in the plans. Ourselves, we cannot finance with the RRF stranded assets. So, there would have to be, very specific requirements on, the asset to be able to deal with, hydrogen or other gases, and everything would have to be part of a very credible, set of measures leading to, let's say, this reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. Otherwise it would not be possible. It would not pass the test, simply.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would give the opportunity to Rafael Hanoto from C Bankwatch to ask questions.
Yes, thank you, Alexa. Yes, this is a question I had in my presentation, and I think it's an important one. It's the issue of publishing the draft plans that are received by the Commission, because I understand that a plan is not an official document until it's officially submitted. However, what we see is that in cohesion policy, for example, we have the legal tools that really say you need to be transparent in the document and involve civil society. We do not have those in the RRF, and that means that there is a risk that we do not see the plans until it's too late. And Just a specific example, we understood that, for example, the Commission is already discussing with the Polish government about what should be in the plans and what the government is thinking about. However, I don't think that anyone in our member groups or civil society in Poland has really a concrete idea of what is in the plans. And I mean, this really shows you the discrepancy between the information that is shared with the Commission and the impossibility for the partners to really assess the plans. And we also understand that the Commission is happy to have partners also helping them assessing the plans, or at least providing their views. So my question is, do you plan to have in any way a platform or a way to share the information or to share the content of the plans, especially in the case where we fear that it's going to be too late when the official publication is actually done?
Yes, Miguel.
Apologies, I lost you and I could not hear the question. My apologies.
So my question was, do you plan to publish the draft plans or to communicate in any way of the plans that are being discussed between the Commission and member states, especially in the cases where those are not open to the public at the national level?
This is not possible, because I mean these are documents from the government that are shared with us, in a confidential way as part of working documents, with the Commission. But these are not Commission documents, so ourselves we cannot legally disclose these documents, and it would be for the member states to decide, if they want to publish them or not. I mean, we have already received, questions in that sense. And clearly, I mean, ourselves, we cannot disclose this, legally. It's in the hands of the government. And also, I mean, some of these, the documents, being discussed, I mean, there might not be complete plans, and, there might be living documents, and there might be, sharing of a specific component dealing with, I don't know, the labor market or something. So, I mean, the state, I mean, I wouldn't think of this, of the documents that we're receiving yet as, fully fledged draft plans complying with the regulation, because this is not, I mean, they are not put or presented to us in that way. But I mean, if you are interested in a specific document and so on, I mean, this is for the national governments. I mean, ourselves, we will only be, if I am right, because I mean, I am not an expert on, access to document matters, and I rely, on our lawyers and the services. But I understand that ourselves, we are only obliged to, to publish the final plan on which we are doing our assessment.
Thank you. This is very clear. And I mean, just to reply really quickly, this is also what we understood, the process that also happened on the NECPs, for example. But you understand that if you're only obliged to publish the final plans and the national government is absolutely reluctant to publish any kind of plan, this would end up in a situation where partners might not see the plans at all until it's very late, especially in the countries that do not plan to consult.
Yeah, I mean, there the only thing we have is the requirement in the regulation for, member states to do appropriate consultations. I mean, it's the only tool we have. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now questions from the participants towards the Commission. Attila Panovic's question: the Commission emphasizes that it takes 25 years to transform the industrial sector and all value chains. This means that to be ready in 2050, decisions and actions need to be taken in the next 3-4 years. So it's a comment. And Wojciech from Poland. Recently, we have also witnessed in Poland that even if the EU funds are spent along the climate goals, the national funds are gradually redirected to harmful subsidies or investments, and Poland would like to secure independence from EU on that. Should there be any reaction from the EU to that. However, this reaction will certainly going to be criticized as a sovereignty breach. So that's towards the Commission. Yes. Yeah. Miguel, would you like to answer to those questions?
I don't think I am qualified to answer to that question because it's not at all, you know, under my responsibilities. I mean, myself, I can only refer to the Recovery and Resilience Facility, you know, in which we are working on to make sure that it respects, you know, the do no significant harm principle, and you know, leads to a reduction, an incredible and robust path of reduction to the greenhouse gas emissions. And that is the only thing that I can say on that topic. I mean, on this other thing, I mean, I don't feel qualified to answer.
And that question was directed to Markus.
Opa, yes, thanks. So the question, indeed, what is happening with the rest, right? When we have our earmarking for climate, this can be on the overall level, on the MFF level, or for the different plans. How good are we? How sure are we that the rest is not doing harm or turning back what has been achieved with the green funding? This is, of course, the big question. We have, I mean, we heard we have the do no significant harm principle, where we don't know yet how the operation will look like. However, as well, we have environmental legislation. We have a set of climate and environment strategies and targets, objectives. However, I think no doubt that we are finding contravening measures in the past, and there's a big threat to see them as well in the future. I think the very, very unsatisfactory answer is there is nothing but to continue what many of you are doing, to raise the flag, as well to make very clear to the Commission services, this is for RRF, but as well for DG Regio, that there's something going wrong. I think we have to as well face reality that in many cases, funds under the so-called shared management is that the member states has, of course, oversight and responsibility, but as well, of course, the power and the leverage outside of the Commission's sphere of influence. So this is what we've been dealing with all the time, really. How far can the strategic framework, environmental legislation as well, steer the funding at EU level, the entire one? Again, I've been mentioning as well the European semester, right, as a governance tool, which is not in the scope, it's limited, but it's as well with it, this impact is so. I think again the unsatisfactory answer from the EU, you cannot have the final solution to the question what is happening with the money on the ground entirely.
Thank you. And the question arrived to Mr. Hilterter, sorry, from Juraj Merihar. Will the Commission also guide member states on assessing the profits of the big companies like steel, aluminium, etc.? They are able to prepare big projects which can be also financed from their profits. Risk of fast spending, not in line with the polluter pays principle. Mr. Hilterter, I offer for the sound to answer that.
If I understand yes, if I understand the question right, I mean, ourselves, we can only assess the plans legally. I mean, you know, in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the only thing that we can do is to assess, you know, the plans and to assess the measures of the plans. And here it is important also to know that legally our relationship is with the member state. And we are going to assess what the member state intends to do and what the member state, you know, intends plans for the use of the different, funds. Now, in terms of assessing the profits of the companies, I mean, this is not at all in the scope of the facility, and what we want to make sure is what the impact of the different measures complies with the principles that I was mentioning that I was mentioning myself. But we don't have as I said, any specific, let's say, provision that could help us looking into specific companies. I mean, beyond the fact that, the spending of the recovery and resilience facility needs to comply with state aid provisions. So, I mean, there would be a thorough look, from the state aid perspective. Thank you.